I'm so freaking excited is Albert is the first talent agent that ever returned an email to me, gave me a shot, sent me out on auditions, got me booked all the way from my first co-star to a series freaking regular.
Every one of us that are listening on this call, every one of us has the potential to achieve excellence. I will get people that will write me, I'm an aspiring actor, or I'm a struggling actor. If you're telling me that, I can only imagine what messages you're telling yourself. Materials are very important, but the most important thing that's not discussed a lot is your mindset.
Remember, I called her and I was just like, hey, like, I don't really feel comfortable with this part of the audition, like, I was just looking for guidance. And for me, it was really woman to woman. Like, I wanted someone to empower me to say, like, turn that shit down. And instead, she was like, well, eventually, honey, like, that's going to be something you're going to have to do in the industry.
I've seen people turn one-line co-stars into, like, 5, 6 episodes because, the writers or, the directors or showrunners said, we love this person.
It's okay, Habibi. Today is such a special episode for me because we have Dr. Albert Bramante here. Albert, welcome to It's Okay, Habibi. Thank you for being here.
I really appreciate you having me on here. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you both.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So for everybody to know why I'm so freaking excited is Albert is the first talent agent that ever returned an email to me, gave me a shot, sent me out on auditions, got me booked all the way from my first co-star to a series freaking regular. So Albert is the real deal and has done things for my career that nobody else like took a shot on me and did. So Albert, when I tell you thank you so much for being here, I'm so excited to like press your brain about all these other things. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure, and I have to say it's an absolute honor working with you. I wish every actor was like you.
Keep going. I love this for me.
I'll throw in compliments here and there.
So real quick, I think the other things that is like, I only knew you so much as a talent agent. And then over the years, I now started understanding you are way more than that. So, you're PhD, talent agent, performance psychologist, mindset expert. You spent 20 years helping high performers. And with your PhD in psychology and certifications in NLP, we're going to need to talk through what NLP is. You bridge the gap between talent, business success, and the psychology of peak performance. So there's so much more to you than I ever knew working with you just as an actor. So those are the things I think I'm so excited to get into. And I know Noel is so excited because you don't speak to someone often who works in like hypnosis. So we're going to be super obsessed with that. But to start off, if you could tell our audience, our listeners, what it is that you love people to take away from all the through lines of like the things that you work on, what do you want them to take away? What value do you want them to get out of today's talk?
Well, the main value here is, I think the core of my work is bringing the best out of people and helping people really reach their dreams. And I do this as an agent, but also just in general, is just, coming, and I'm going to kind of start integrating hypnosis and NLP. And the reality is we're all capable of achieving excellence. Every one of us that are listening on this call, every one of us has the potential to achieve excellence. It's just sometimes a matter of we may get a little distracted, misguided, or just somewhere, put straight away from that message, just straight away from our true essence of who we are. So I hope that, like my mission is to kind of help people get back to that, get back to their roots and really become the great person that they're really destined to be, despite whatever limitations may be thrown at them at times.
Mm,
Love that. Thank you so
I
much.
do too.
I think Noel and I, obviously, like, that's a lot of what we talk about here on the podcast is those limiting beliefs, and not just beliefs, but also the things that are constructed by some of our identities and how that helped shape the beliefs about how far we can get.
Mhm.
And so it's especially as an actor, entrepreneur, whatever, it's really refreshing to know that there are real techniques we can use to get past some of these roadblocks. So when you start working with someone, whether it be an actor, an entrepreneur, do you take different approaches to help and identify mental blocks? And how do you start to identify what a mental block is?
Well, a mental block is when anyone's sort of not when I can kind of tell when they're not living up to their potential. Now, in most contexts, I would say most of my work is, talent agent and actor or client. Some of the things I can do is like some of the language you use, what identity. I mean, you mentioned identity, and that's a core part of this work with anything, whether you're not for an art or professional or an artist. What is your identity? If I start to see like struggle, starving artists, I don't somewhere along the line started romanticizing the idea of the starving artist or the struggling artist or a struggling actor. And as for me, as like I never understood that. It's like, well, why does it have to be why does art have to be painful? Why does, your acting journey have to be struggle? Why can't it be, triumph and thriving? So that would be a part of it. And working with someone, changing their core identity is really the main thing to get them out of those limiting beliefs. As you know, I get a lot of submissions a week for representation, and most of them, are okay. The ones that really stand out to me, in maybe not in the best light, is I will get people that will write me. I'm an aspiring actor, or I'm a struggling actor. I haven't had auditions in a long time, and I'm like sitting there, scratching my head, reading these because automatically it's like, why are you limiting yourself like? If you're telling me that, I can only imagine what messages you're telling yourself,
Mm,
when no one's looking and when no one's listening. What messages are you interpersonally saying? And that's a cause of concern because until you change the way you describe in your identity, it's going to be very hard to change the outer world. And a lot of people, I think, have it backwards. They think their outer world has to change before they can change their identity, and it's really the opposite way. We have to change from the inside out. So if you want to be an actor that books work, because a lot of people ask me what's the qualities that really will make an actor book versus actor who doesn't book, and a lot of it has to do with mentality. And
mm,
I'm going to say it like that. And the headshots are important, yes. All of these standard stuff that you hear, business, materials are very important. But the most important thing that's not discussed a lot is your mindset and how you're approaching the world and how you're approaching, the business and who you are. So that's the main thing that you really have to sometimes clear up first. And it's a little challenging because, like, you said, I really didn't know that about me. Typically, I like to really respect boundaries and ethics and all that. So I'm not going to start psychoanalyzing every client I take on. That would be creepy and inappropriate. So I'm going to be a lot of times just nodding and taking note. Okay, this is interesting.
mm,
It isn't until they start like questioning things like, why am I not getting work? And it comes to where there's a kind of like a really delicate balance. And I'm like, okay, I need to be supportive and kind of like saying this. But I'm like, it may not be your headshot. Yes, of course it's but there's something fundamentally happening here. You have to change your own identity because it's coming out in your marketing materials. It's bleeding across how you're presenting yourself.
mhm,
And it's not just
mhm,
for actors, but even in the corporate world. If you're going for a job interview and it's gonna come across the way your identity is gonna come across how you're gonna perform in interviews, how you're gonna perform in all aspects of the job. And so that's where we have to fundamentally begin. One of the things when I received my PhD in 2015, my dissertation was on self-defeating behavior in performing artists because I started being, in talent rep business 2004, 2005-ish. And the one thing that I kept like really seeing a lot of, which is kind of like surprising me, not necessarily in a positive way, was a lot of actors were self-sabotaging, shooting themselves in the foot. And it wasn't just me, other reps, other people in the industry were kind of lamenting on this. Like, why are some of these actors being their own worst enemy? Why are they not really helping themselves? Because it's a very, as you know, it's a very tough business to begin with. You know,
Wait, that's actually something if I can jump in, I want we are gonna definitely get back to self-sabotage because guilty and getting through it, and I wanna, like, connect that to shadow work if we can, because I know Noelle and I are reading Existential Kinks, which is just about shadow work. But, like, what speaking of the industry, like, you are the one that everybody is trying to get to, right? So, like, what made you first decide from psychology to say, I'm gonna go ahead and start managing or being an agent for talent. Like I'm gonna go ahead and jump in here. Like what got you started in this? What's
well,
your story?
yeah, it's for what I started off, many lifetimes ago as an actor myself. And I realized I didn't really understand the industry, and that was part of it too. And I didn't really do well, not because I lack of trying. I just had no knowledge about the industry. I was doing
Mhm.
everything blindly. So, when I was in high school and in college, I was involved in some of the drama club. In college, I took some acting classes. And what I really found when I think that really was a defining moment for me when I wanted to go back to act is I really enjoyed hanging around actors. I really enjoyed hanging around producers and filmmakers more so than I did with other academic types. I just felt it
Mhm.
was too stuffy. And a lot of times academics can be very elitist and it didn't really vibe with me, even though I can certainly hold my own in an academic conference and symposium and all that. But it wasn't for me. Like I really enjoy actors. And what I found was my last semester when I was going for a master's degree, this is 2001, the same year of 9/11.
Mm.
I found myself doing an internship, look, by stroke of luck, at a New York City talk show, which was at that time the Sally Jesse Raphael show. N- I worked in the counseling side of things, at the aftercare or the crisis intervention, helping the guests follow through on things. But I found that, and it was like my first foray into professional show business. And it was an eye-opening experience. Like I got to see, how a major set is run because contrary to popular belief, a talk show is really not much different than a film or TV show. I'm sorry
Mm.
to burst anybody's bubble who likes to believe that talk shows are real. It's
Mhm.
all an act. Most of it is still an act. It's still a choreographed, directors, stage writers, teleprompters, all that stuff. So, and I was like, this is interesting. I didn't really want to go back into working in talk shows, but I was like, this is really interesting to watch things being made. And then, of course, I started meeting actors, and because sometimes you would have actors that would wrangle in the crowd in the show in these shows. So, and then people said you should go into acting. So I did a little bit of that myself after that. So, because right after my internship with Sally 9/11 had happened, the same people that I was working with in my internship were hitting the ground running with 9/11, doing crisis intervention work. Said we need your help.
Mm.
Okay, at that time, I was out of work. I was only 23, 24 at the time. Didn't know what I wanted to do in my life. So I started off acting. I'm like, this is a real reason for me. But what I did was I would find myself befriending actors. And then, because at that time, you could tell this is most those of you on the call that are actors will know. At that time, Backstage Magazine was the only thing that was really out there. Every Thursday, Faithful Backstage. So I would, as I was looking for notices myself to submit to, I was also cutting out notices of other actors I met with and say, hey, you should look into applying for this role. You should be applying for that role.
Mm.
And then a couple actors who are on set with me saying, hey, I wish you could be I wish you could be my agent. And then the wheels started turning. I'm like, okay.
Maybe
So
that's what I want to do.
maybe that's what I want to do. You know what? And then I stepped away. I said, I really don't want it wasn't fun, to be honest with you, too. Especially the one or two experiences I had with background work, that's not fun at all. I
Yeah,
had it
did it once.
did it once and I was like, I don't care. I don't even I don't need the money that bad. I don't need it this bad.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, if this is what it's like, and even doing some student film because some of them were good, some of them weren't, as you know, doing student films, it's like a luck of the draw. Sometimes you
Yeah.
get a good one, sometimes you get a bad one. So I was like, okay. And then I started helping out with casting. I was like, this is fun, putting together pieces of a puzzle. So I started casting short films here and there. for filmmakers. Very low budget. These were like really, no pay shorts, but I was still putting together and I was enjoying it. Like this is
Mhm.
fun. I'm connecting people. This is like, it's a game of like putting pieces of a puzzle together. And so I was like, I want to do this full time. I want to. So, and then I started my first business, my first agency, as you were a part of, started in 2004, which was Emerging Talent. And that I was like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen here. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to have fun with this. And so that's what I did.
People should wake up every day saying exactly that. I don't know what's gonna happen, but I'm gonna have
I'm
fun
just
with
gonna
this.
do it.
Like my
Yeah.
daily
Well,
mantra.
and we'll get into that, especially when we talk about manifestation and all of that, because I believe that that's a really important mantra to have. But I didn't know. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to just do this. And so I started the company in 2004. And, I was like, okay, now let me add more to my plate. Let me go back for a PhD. I can't, let me. So I did that because I wasn't sure, to be quite honest with you, like if this was going to work out, or not. Because I'll speak kind of from a vulnerable moment here. The first couple of years were very rough for me in the talent business because it's a cutthroat industry, as you know. I don't know I was exactly kind of cut out for that initially in the beginning or expecting that. And I had a little bit of a hard time adjusting because of that, because I'm not a cutthroat person, but sometimes, it was sort of like, you know, I mean, most of the agents and managers I know now are great, but at that time it was sort of like some of the old school method was okay, either you were the whale or you were the fish being eaten by the whale, one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the latter. I was kind of getting taken advantage of and taken for a ride a few times. But that was my own working too. But I stick with it because I also believe that there's an idea of perseverance too, because I kind of knew that even though yes, it is cutthroat, and even today I still know it is, but there's ways around it. And I had to make it my own.
Mhm.
But I became an entrepreneur initially because I work well with people, but I don't like working for people.
Do you want
And
to clarify the distinction for you, what that
yes,
means?
I'm very good in collaborating with people, partnering, sharing things and compromise. I tend to be the type of person I like to be very proactive and I like to do things. And I like to sometimes even find different ways of doing things, which can be a little threatening for some bosses. I'll just say it, put it
Mhm.
that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew if I was going to be an agent or manager or whatever that was, at the time, I wanted to be on my own because let's say I were to get a job at an agency. Now, maybe that would have had better clout because at that time they may have better connections, but I wouldn't be in charge of who I was going to represent. And because at some of the I have other colleagues who work for agents or have been agents at other firms, and a lot of times you cannot choose the people you can, but they can't. You have to have a vote of approval. So I
Mm,
couldn't just have my own clients, I would have to get
Mhm.
approval. And if they wanted to, let's say, drop a client, I would have no vote, even if I didn't want to. And that was something I really didn't want to be in, a situation with. I wanted to kind of like make my own rules and kind of do things the way I want to do it. I
And
yes.
mean,
Albert, I think the biggest thing too, like Emil and I were just reading a book for Parvati. She's like a survivor player that played for like 20 years, and she's doing her autobiography. And she said, like, back then when she won her season, like the Hollywood and like the casting arena and whatnot were very cutthroat. And now there's more of the culture, like the cancel culture, where like people are nicer and worried about how you would word things and say things to people. But I could only imagine back then, like you're saying, if you're working for someone, you might need to do things that are not ethical or don't align with your values just because this is how we do it
yeah,
here, because that's how you get the views, you get the clicks, or whatever it was back then. So that makes total sense that back then it was
yeah.
really hard for someone to just let go of that.
And it is hard because, now I even like speaking with like, yeah, I'd say since 2017, we kind of had like the whole Me Too movement, which has been valuable in that area because I'm not gonna sit here and and talk too much about this, but I did see the casting couch a lot, and not I've been around in interactions where I've seen that being implied, and it was just something. It was that's another reason like I can't be a part of that. I'm not going to be a part of anything sleazy,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
even if it's implied. I don't want to do that, and that's something. Well, a big thing for me is integrity. A big thing for me is honor and integrity. And so that was another reason, sort of like where I was like having that identity crisis the first couple of years in the industry. This is like 2004, 2007 ish. I was like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Did I make the right decision? Am I in the right space? Because it was, it was the cutthroatness of it. It's gotten a lot better,
Mhm.
in that area, I would say in the past 10 years, it's gotten a lot better. And embracing the cultural diversity and less stereotypes that we're seeing, now, I think.
Yeah, I think for sure that part has gotten better. And, I've been doing this for like 10 years now. As you know, you were there at the start. And I remember this one manager that I had worked with briefly. It's kind of upsetting. Basically, what I'm thinking of is the power differential when young artists in career, not age, don't know, like you said, like don't know how to navigate the industry. And I remember calling her because it was that James Franco show on like HBO or Showtime. I don't know, it was
Hmm.
pretty raunchy.
Yeah, it was. Hmm.
Yeah, and so I had gotten an audition, and this is when I was only, like, getting co-stars and, not very, like, one-line co-stars, and they wanted me to, like, have my shirt off, and as you know, like, I'm, like, super protective about all that kind of stuff. Like I'm not just good if it's like a Game of Thrones series regular, okay, maybe, but
Yeah.
not for a background featured background thing. And I remember I called her and I was just like, "Hey, like I don't really feel comfortable with this part of the audition, like I was just looking for guidance." And for me, it was really woman to woman. Like I wanted someone to empower me to say like turn that shit down. And
Hmm.
instead, I will never forget where I was standing, what she said, how I felt, and she was like, "Well, eventually, honey, like, that's gonna be something you're gonna have to do in the industry, so you might as well just kinda rip that Band-Aid now." And I remember going like, "Okay." And, like, now I'd be like, I would just turn it down. Like, I have,
Yeah.
experience teaches, but back then, you have people that you're trusting and looking for guidance telling you what to do, so what would you say to actors who are navigating decisions that do go against either their integrity or their honor or like their sense of self? There's a difference between going after the role and doing things to be in character and then also changing yourself.
Yeah. The one thing I would always say is you never should do anything that really goes against your core values or integrity. It's not that important, especially not a one line co star on an HBO series.
Yeah.
Again, definitely everybody wants that first co star, and that's important. But the truth of the matter is, I would have normally, because I remember that show in vivid detail, and the breakdowns were out of this world.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it. It was really, intense, a lot of the breakdowns. But the one thing I would say is first of all, I wouldn't have even submitted a client until I had that conversation, because I've had numerous conversations around the show with people. I'm like, okay, there's a show on HBO now. You said you want to do a co-star. How do you feel about this before I submit you? Fit the breakdown, but there's going to be nudity involved.
Mhm.
Yeah, and now I've had some that said, I'm fine. I had some that say I don't want to do it. I'm not going to even bother going through that step in submitting you. Now, there are times where something can come up where an audition pops up where a casting director will reach out and say, "Hey, I got this role and it requires nudity." And then I would still bring it up to my client, but I wouldn't advise them to take, because if you're not comfortable doing it, I don't want you taking the role.
Yeah.
And now what I've done, like a newer process I've been doing without is like when we onboard a new client now. One of the things that I evolved with when we were met, I was just freelance only. Now, so, I mainly the newer actors I sign on only. And after the paperwork is initially signed, we then bring you back in for a strategy session.
Ooh, I love that.
And so the strategy session is to kind of We look at your profiles, of course, and Actors Access Casting Networks and make sure they're all up to par. But then we have a conversation about the types of roles you want and what you don't want.
Yeah.
Because a one-line co-star is not going to make or break anybody. I mean, it's great as glamorous as it is. It's just a co-star, and I would kind of think, and I can't speak for that manager or that agent, but you then have to worry: is that agent worrying about just making as much commissions as much as possible versus the lifespan of the actor? Because that's the one thing too is like being a talent representative also means molding a career, not just, hey, how many bookings can I get in a day? Now, those are great to have, but that's the whole thing. If it's not going to serve you, what's the point?
No, I think that connects back to when we're talking about self-sabotage and the limiting beliefs is like when you have people hammering into like you're gonna have to diminish who you are, change who you are to fit into this industry, it's adding to those limiting beliefs, or like that's my view. What do you think about that? And like if we could circle back to what you were saying about how actors tend to self-sabotage themselves or people who are going after something.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely, the self sabotage could be getting bad advice, listening to people, and I'm not going to speak, but there are companies now that are actively preying on actors. Like
What do you mean by that?
uh, not necessarily in a moral way, but financially. Like, okay, you need to pay all this money to study with me in order to get, if you want to, I'm the only place that you can train with. That will get you
I have
to want.
not heard that, and if anybody came up to me and talked to me about that, that was one of the first lessons I think I learned, like, if an agent is telling you you have to pay for, like, headshots through them or
Oh
pay
no.
for
Well, this
auditions.
this wasn't an agent. This is someone who like is what I would consider a guru in the
I
industry.
see. Still crazy because
Yeah,
any
so well, it is.
yeah,
Not
even in, like,
nonetheless.
religion, it's like you have to go look into other religions to make sure you like the one you have, so, like, I would encourage you to go learn everywhere. It's just gonna help all of us
Yeah,
at the end of the day.
and speaking on that, so one of the things I encourage, and I know we got getting sidetracked here, is especially if you're a young actor, and let's say I meet you in a showcase and we have a meeting and it goes well. It's going to sound counterintuitive and counterproductive, and people may say, "What are you doing?" But I'm going to encourage you to take every meeting possible and meet other agents and other managers just to see. I haven't. I know I'm a lot different than a lot of them, but I want you to get that perspective because ultimately, at the end of the day, you as the actor has to like and get along with your rep, and vice versa, of course. But it's a working relationship, and so that's the important thing. Now, going, and that's the one thing too is like, where does the rep see you, and that's where you have that conversation, like the types of roles you want, what's the type of roles the rep sees you in. And I think that's when there's synergy there, that's when it's a good idea to move forward. But going back to what you were saying before, there's a tendency sometimes when we're trying to form our identity that we go into people pleasing mode.
Yeah,
Mm.
And I
I'm
think
so
sometimes
guilty.
actors do that. Sure, agent, manager, yes, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. I'll do what you tell me to do. Even though at the core of my being, I'm like, I don't want to do this. And like you said, you could have took that co-star. You could have been on, showing up on set, almost being sick to your stomach even because it was not something you wanted to do. But yet, here it is. So the
And
point of the
the other
matter,
thing about that too, just from an actor's perspective, it's really not a smart idea to take a role, like even if you happen to get it, like you kill the audition, you're gonna be on set, you're gonna be naked or doing whatever it is thing that you feel in like viscerally uncomfortable doing. And as we say, like the red light picks up everything. So you're not gonna serve the character justice, you're not gonna
Mm.
serve the story justice. You're actually gonna and you're not gonna do yourself a justice because the people in that room are gonna remember you weren't comfortable on set, you weren't good at the job. So you're
yeah,
gonna
you
shoot
weren't
yourself in
authentic.
the foot. Yeah, you weren't authentic. Sorry to have to cut you off.
No, no, that's very correct. And this, you bring up a good point. This business is all about relationships too, because very often, even though yes, it's up to the casting director to bring you in for the audition, but you'd be surprised about how many people that are in production have the say and whether you get that booking or not, whether you book the role, finally book the role or not. And that's the one thing I learned, like especially when TV, there could be 30 or 40 people that are, looking at you before that, few line co-star. And if you automatically leave a bad, impression, you could give the best auditions ever, but you're not going to get cast. Consequently, on the other hand, we can use this as a good thing if you're really great on set. I've seen people turn one line co-stars into, like, 5, 6 episodes because, the writers of it, the directors or showrunners said, we love this person.
Wow.
Mm.
So I had a client once who had a one line audition for Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, booked the role, shot it. It was just one line. It was an unnamed character. It was like meth head number one.
Yeah, yeah.
He booked the role. They loved him so much that he wound up doing like 8 more episodes, and they made him a
Do
named
you
character.
remember, like, some details of what happened when he was on set? Like, how did he connect? Because I know, like, I've been on set a ton of times, and it's like, "Go, go, go, hurry up and wait." You don't have time really to connect with people. So,
Well,
like,
I
what was
mean,
that person's experience like, what happened? Who did they connect
well,
with?
first of all, it's kind of this is out of the norm. It's not
Yeah,
always the case, but he was very professional. That was one. He easy to work with, very friendly, and I think because he was a very unique type, so I think that kind of helped. And Kimmy Schmidt was a really absurdist type comedy, like over the top. So I
yeah.
think that because he was such a character type to begin with, that helped. That doesn't happen all the time, but still, if you leave a good impression, it's always good because a lot of times what happens very often in this world is, yes, agents and managers will submit every time there's a breakdown, and casting will look for auditions, but they also have a list too before the breakdown comes out of like who they want to call in.
Mhm.
Mm.
And a
The
lot of
short
times
list.
showrunners will recommend and say, hey, I knew this one actor from another shoot I have. Can we bring them in? And because the directors and showrunners are really the bosses of the casting directors, they're going to do what they're told. Okay, let's bring them in. And so a lot of times I'll get that too, where I'll get auditions even before the breakdown comes out for a role. So it's all about relationships, and it comes back down to integrity. So if you're not, you really have to be on your best at all times. And this is why it's important to do your inner work too, if you have to, because as much as we're human beings and all that, and I'm all compassionate about that. When you're on set, it is not about therapy mode. You're supposed to be really, you show up to do a job, be professional and gracious and nice to work with, and be great. And that's how you want to be remembered, is being really great to work.
Alright, so let's sorry, no, you go ahead.
I had a question, interesting question about reality TV, and it's probably very different than regular acting, I guess, or like specific roles. Because what I hear a lot when you have people who are applying or casting for a reality TV show, they tell you like be yourself, like we're looking for someone to be yourself, but then you hear a lot of the people who actually become really popular in reality TV are the people who actually did extra things to cast the casting director's attention. That's how
Hmm.
they made it through. So like where how do I be myself, but at the same time I am like nervous.
Hmm.
Like I want to please you. I like you mentioned, I'm like standing in front of like 20, 30 people that are looking at me right now, and I'm like, I want to please you all. Like pick me, but it's just confusing
Well,
for the normie.
yeah. Well, I would say the main thing is to be yourself, because when I say be yourself, I know that's kind of my oxymoron, but it's really asking, but I think just don't try, because the thing about people pleasing, and I'm myself a recovering people pleaser. So I can tell you that it's not going to work. When you try to please everybody, you're not going to please really anybody. You know, there's times where, you just have to stand your ground, and yeah, people are not going to be happy. I made decisions sometimes even as an agent and business owner. I'm like, okay, if I do this scenario, people on this side are going to be mad. But if I do this scenario to make them happy, the people on my right are getting mad. Okay. Now I have to make the decision. Okay, which is less likely going to get me into long term trouble here. So sometimes it's inevitable that people are not going to be happy. Yeah, I think the main thing is being okay with that. And I can't speak for reality TV. I don't work in that area. I have no interest in working in reality TV
It's
because
messy. It's not.
I'm sorry to say that, but it's not real. Yes, maybe people are, situations may be authentic, but it's all scripted. Why did it have directors? Have you seen the credits? You know, um, because it's all about ratings too. Because if I just film people like, okay, we're just going to film you in a relationship today, that's going to be very boring. So but we want salacious drama, and that's what people watch reality shows. So let me
Hmm.
manufacture that as much as possible. So I think just having the overtop personality, and the same goes with social media influencers too.
Mm.
And so it's what I would say is be authentic to who you are, and the right people will come along.
Yeah, no, please continue.
The right people will come along, and maybe not everybody who you may want to come along was going to come along. And I kind of talked about this in another podcast where I said, not everybody is meant to come with you, and not everyone is meant to be a part of your journey. And that may be a painful message sometimes you experience and or to be with, and that sometimes for even family, that or people that you were once close to that are not meant for you to be long term with. And that's where there's a popular saying that there's a lot of people that are here for a lifetime, here for a moment, or here for a season,
Mhm.
and it's time to sometimes just say, okay, this is not gonna be worth it. Now, as you know, I ended a partnership, that I had for a couple of years. I didn't really go too much into it with the actors, but it wasn't an easy decision,
Mhm.
and it was hard. And there was a lot of fear and uncertainty there. But I had to do it for my own integrity. I can tell you that.
Mm.
For my
Yeah.
own, bottom line integrity, I had to do it. It was the best thing I did for myself. Not the easiest thing, because I could have stayed for the sake of, oh, I want to please everybody. Let me just stay, but I would have been more miserable, and that, both of us would have been unhappy.
100%. Noelle, also on that too, like the people pleasing or whatever is people can sense whether it's a partnership that's not meant to be an abusive partnership, like everything from the most extreme version to the lightest version. People are picking up who you are and they're going to play off that. And like they used to tell us, like casting directors, for example, could pick up your desperation from a mile away. And it's a
Mm.
turn off. It's a turn off. So I would say that it's the same thing with reality TV, with dating, with anything. If
Oh yeah,
anybody's picking up like pick me energy, they're going to be like, get the hell away from me. Like, I don't want you near. They
yeah,
want real people.
Mm.
and I'm glad you brought that up, Mel, because I think it's so important when it comes to like actors approaching agents and managers. I get really uncomfortable when people start like fawning, over us because it's like I'm just a normal person. Like, you know,
Talk to me
But you're
normal.
not. You have
talk
access
to me
to
like a normal
power.
person. Just I'm or like when I have a meeting and people are so nervous, I'm like, stop, relax. We're just having a conversation. And but you're right because desperation, equals again you're not secure in yourself. And that's the biggest turnoff is the insecurity. You're not secure in yourself, and that's not going to work. And that's why people pleasing doesn't work because we can sense that. And that's why a lot of people pleasers historically get taken advantage of and get treated poorly because you allow yourself to be treated poorly.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the work, kind of comes up to the next thing is accountability and taking responsibility. Now, I don't mean blaming yourself, but taking responsibility. Even in a situation where you've been abused or betrayed, the important is to take some responsibility for that
Mm.
because, yes, you should never have been abused and you're not all of that, but you allowed it to happen. That's the responsibility you have to take. You allowed it, you enable it to happen. And that's where the responsibility has to come in and say, look, okay, I'm not a victim. And it's not taking victim mentality. It's like being a creator because there's so many, and a lot of actors walk around as victims too. The industry doesn't like me. The industry, stinks, and nobody, I can't get a break. And I hear this a lot, and especially, back, and I'm going to say back in the day when they had actual audition rooms. The one thing, especially as an actor, that I couldn't even figure out, and this was a long time ago. I'd be in waiting rooms, and I'd be hearing people just moaning and complaining about the industry, and I would be in my head saying, "Why are you here? If you don't like
Yeah.
it so much, why are you here? Why are you auditioning?" And also part of me was like, shouldn't you be your head be in a script rather than talking and gossiping and all of that? Shouldn't you be looking at your script and getting ready to go in that room? Yeah, and that's the whole thing too, I think is, and that's the one thing I look for when I meet an actor is, um, obviously I want them to be talented. I want them to be able to be bookable, a unique type. But at the same time, how are they carrying themselves? I because also, how are they going to be on set? That's another thing too. Because I'm not going to work with somebody who's going to be very difficult on set or very
Hmm.
dramatic on set. No, I don't. You could be you could be the next, talented as, Meryl Streep or Denzel Washington. I'm not working with you if you're dramatic and
Mhm.
causing, or high maintenance or difficult to work with. Won't happen, and you're not going to get very far. The one thing that I would really, again, is just how you carry yourself and how you allow yourself to be, told and conducted. I think really important. I really hope that people, that actors or anybody listening here, is your integrity is the most important thing, and your own self worth is so important. And
Hmm.
it took me a while. Like I actually joke around if I could take my 18-year-old self, I'd slap myself around a bit. Like, because I was a lot different then. And I was very much a people pleaser. I wanted people to like me. Like everything was just I want people to like me. And the ironic part is when you have the confidence and self-assurance, people will like you more so than you were in a people-pleasing mode. It's ironic because when you don't need it anymore. And also as you get older, I think you start to realize you don't care anymore what people think. It's like, okay, that's great. But yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, so Noelle and I were definitely looking at each other laughing when you were talking about like the people who repeat stay in abusive relationships. I think the first time somebody
Victim.
abuses you is unexpected, but like enjoying that pattern or not really realizing. So that's what we were talking about with existential kinks, or like Eckhart Tolle talks about the shadow
Hmm.
work. And what is it when he says the present self and the something else, like yourself left? Anyway,
Hmm.
when it comes to these limiting beliefs and this self-sabotage, so how is it that we can start to pay attention to, oh, that's a sign that self-sabotage is in the room and how to work
Well,
through that?
I would definitely say repeated patterns. If you find yourself always constantly, especially when it comes to like abusive relationships, very often they come in cycles. It's like you just find yourself in the same relate. Maybe it's maybe a different person, but the same dynamics keep happening over and over again. Where you find yourself as an actor just not booking work, you meet all these agents and managers, or that you find yourself getting removed from the roster fairly quickly, consistently. I think it's time to figure out, okay, there may be something happening here.
Hmm.
When it comes to identity and shadow work, keep in mind our brain is there to protect us. Our ego is there to protect us at all times, protect us from anything that's out of the ordinary. Now, some people, especially if you grew up with childhood trauma or child abuse or any type of chaotic households, you may be comfortable with the idea of chaos in your life or the idea of being treated poorly. And you mentioned a great point about, and I know it's going to sound hard to understand, but people do enjoy sometimes being victimized or being in that victim mentality. It's like that. It's really, I don't want to say enjoyment. It's more of a comfort level because
Yeah, that's
now, if
sorry,
I
the
need to
book
finish that.
Existential Kinks that we're talking about is like she talks about owning whatever it is in your pattern. There's something in you that, and Eckhart Tolle said the same thing, is like the thing that you hate the most, the thing that bothers you about other people, like you hate liars. Secretly deep down in you, you want to be able to lie. You want to be able to not to hold like yourself up so much to such a high standard, and so you resent others who could live that freely or things like
Yeah,
that. And so you have to start looking at why these patterns are happening and kind of indulge in healthy
yeah,
ways.
and that's the whole thing with shadow work too. Is what exactly when people trigger you, very often it's nothing to do with the other person. I'm sorry to say.
Hmm.
it's something new with you. So like if you start feeling like I just can't stand this person's irritating me. No, I hate to break it to you. It's not the other person, it's you. That there's something in there. Maybe you're envious, maybe you're jealous, or because I hear this a lot. I see, you see, it's so loud. I'm like, do you wish you were allowed? At that point, like, sort of like, okay, you wish you were like that. There's a lot of like, thing in this industry too, where it's just like unresolved shadow work. And, admitting to that, that's okay to feel certain feelings at times, that and owning that. And so the biggest thing is taking ownership. If you want to own self-sabotage, you got to own your behavior. You got to own your faults. And there's nothing wrong with that. Own your, I'll just keep a G ready, but own your, what, in a
Own your
sense.
shit. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay. I just had
Own
to
your
outphrase
shit.
it. Own your shit. That's really important. I didn't know if this was
No, you're
You
good.
could curse.
but I would say when you own your shit in this sense, that's the moment that you're going to start to see breakthrough.
Yeah.
And so that's really the first step with recognizing self-sabotage. And then you have to push through the fears. And a lot of times we have fear of stepping outside the comfort zone. And it's really fear of change. And this is why some people run away from success. They get so close, but they run away.
Mm.
And that's what led me like to do my dissertation. Because I'll share one story. This was back in 2006. I got this audition. This was a Nickelodeon pilot. It was a series regular role. The client was all excited. We've been working for a while. I get a call from a private number about an hour before the audition comes in. And of course, I don't answer. It's private on myself. So it goes to voicemail. And it was just very simple. I can't do this. An hour before the audition, she had decided that she's not going to do it. Not only that, never returned my phone calls, never returned my emails. It took her website offline. And I'm just like, wow. I don't know if it was, I'm assuming, but I never spoke to her afterwards, whether this was just like, okay, this is getting too real now, maybe.
I've been there.
And that it's like, whoa, okay, stop. And it's like, that's where you have to work on things. Because it's like, okay, is this thing too real for you now? That's another thing too, dealing with those fears of like, how do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as this, again, if you see yourself as a starving artist, when you get close to that, it's going to get scary.
Yeah.
And your mind is going to create, because your brain is there to protect you. And if you talk about the reptilian brain subconsciously, in hunter gathering days, the brain, there was a lot of things that were dangerous. And we had to fight or flight at any moment. Now, we're no longer in those dangers, thankfully, and we're more sophisticated times, but our brain still acts the same. So that little bit of discomfort, our brain sends the message to retreat fast.
Mm.
And what we have to do is kind of go above that and say, okay, I need to change this. I need to go past this. I need to, go beyond this and say, okay, what can I do to be better? What can I do to, and this is where sometimes you have to use a lot of talk and say, okay, this is possibly happening right now. This is fear talking. This is not reality.
Mm.
And that's where like the imposter syndrome and inner voice comes in. And I like to say it like it's not something to get rid of, it's something that's there to protect us. And so we thank it for protecting us, but we got this. In that sense, this is not going to be dangerous.
Mm.
And we have to talk through it because otherwise I'm going to find our brain is going to find every logical excuse to get out of it. Now, and may not even realize that you're fear.
And
You may start thinking this is not worth my time and things like that.
And the fear could be like that person who ran away right before. Like it could be success, it could be fame, but it could be financial too. A lot of people are so afraid of actually succeeding in something and actually feeling that they deserve all that money so that they can
Yes.
better their life. They're like, no, 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 I still want to be broke. It's like, no, you don't need to be broke. You
Yeah.
deserve it.
And what's such a dichotomy because consciously everyone's chasing money, everyone's chasing success. But subconsciously, you may be afraid of money, scared of money. I have an entire chapter in a book about the psychology of money, in a sense, because I feel it's so important. Because a lot of times we may get, cultural messages, thrown down especially if you come from a religious and spiritual, upbringing where money is a root of all evil, and which is a misquote, by the way. That it was a love of money, not that money. Money is neutral, but it was the love of money is the root of all evil. It was kind of like the original quote that people took out of context. And so now, if you get told, like, growing up culturally in society that money is bad, money is evil, here's what you think. Well, I don't want to be evil. I'm a good person. So let me get rid of it. And that's why sometimes you see people who go into windfalls. Maybe they hit the lottery. Maybe you get even an actor or an athlete who has a major windfall. They come into millions. And then 2 or 3 years later, they're in more debt than they were when they started because they got rid of it too fast. Like money became radioactive almost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So not only is it how you view money, but are you worthy of this? And that's where self-worth comes in. And this is where sometimes even entrepreneurs or business owners are afraid to charge people because it's like, well, I don't, I don't want to seem too sleazy. I don't want to ask for this. Even sometimes actors too. It's like, I'll hear a lot of actors say, I'll do unpaid work. No, stop. I think after a point you have to, demand payment.
Yep.
A couple of times, yes, maybe to do a student film here and there, or the script's good, you can do that. But once you get at a certain level, you have to start saying no to unpaid work, unless you're
Yeah,
doing a favor for somebody.
my pet peeve is when I see like, like you're gonna get exposure, and it's like these other people who don't even have access to exposure, and I'm like, why are you promising things that you clearly don't even have? Like
Well,
it'd be different if, again, Denzel was telling me, which Denzel wouldn't do this, but if Denzel was producing something, he would pay me for my time. But if he said, "Oh, girl, you're gonna be next to me," I'd be like, "Yes."
yeah,
That is gonna come back. Or like stars actually pay to perform at the Super Bowl because the exposure they're gonna get is gonna be a huge return on
yes,
investment. That's
of
when you can
course,
freaking say exposure.
yeah, and that's why I laugh when I see these notices like exposure. And speaking on integrity, I just had about a month ago. I had to, yeah, kind of really get into, because I mean, I'm okay with like I'm fine with my clients self-submitting. I mean, but I had a young lady who had submitted for a film, and they wanted to be, of course, nude. Hello, you know, but they were only gonna pay her $75 for the day. Like, no, no, no. Uh, I'm like, I wouldn't even take that for 150. And then, of course, I emailed the director. I'm like, can we at least do 200 for the day, 250 for the day? She likes the script, and he wrote me back saying, "But you don't understand, the exposure that she's going to get." I wanted to run him back. I'm like, "Sir, I've been in the business for 22 years now.
You disrespect.
This is, yeah, no, come up with a better stick." And
Yeah,
I just told her, I was like, "I don't think you should do that."
100%.
Period.
They're not functioning professionally, so you're not safe on that set. You probably won't have an
Well,
intimacy coordinator on
yeah,
that set.
and that's the thing about, even if you are decide to do a work with nudity or intimacy. Any union or any self-respecting project is going to have an intimacy coordinator and conversations beforehand on how it's going to work, and it's everything to be choreographed. Because and that's the thing too. What a lot of people even get that are not in the industry. Most of the lovemaking scenes are all choreographed. They're not really happening. Like, I remember one time I was watching a play where there was a lot, the couple were making out. Someone an audience asked the actress at the end, "Were you really kissing?" And she's like, "It looked, we were just doing the dance, and it looked like it from a distance.
It's like
There
fight
was no,
choreography.
yeah,
Like the angles take care of everything.
yeah." And so that's where I'm like, okay, that's the way it should be.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's what worries me with these like little projects here and there where there's the taking advantage of the exploitation. But it all comes down to, what is your self-worth? And you know, what worried me, and to be quite honest, I'm not going to, of course, I'm not protecting her name, but I was worried if she didn't have an agent, would she have taken this role? That would have worried me. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
100%.
and that would have been, that would have been major exploitation. Because also nowadays with social media thing, you also have to another thing you have to be careful too with the roles you take is you don't want something 10 years down the line coming back to you and saying, "Hey, remember this when you were nude here?" And then now you're trying to be taken serious as an actor or, in this other area. So yeah, you've got to be very careful in the whole thing here. But going back to it, yeah, it is all about your self-worth, how you view money, and that will impact how you view success and all that. And are you worthy enough? So, but it really is multi-fat and really interesting to say the least.
So we only have a few minutes left, but there's been a
Hmm.
question that's been aching at my heart in speaking to other actors. And if there is a brief answer to this, please. If not, I'm going to need you to please come back to our show. But when we talk about these limiting beliefs when it comes to like actors who haven't gotten an audition or haven't gotten a booking in a couple of years, there is something to say for like knowing like knowing this part of the process, paying your dues, looking at other examples of people who went through the same thing and found success, all that good stuff. But a lot of times I think in the actor's shoes, it's like we do think there has to be a strategy. There has to be something I can do to move this forward. And then, we'll reach out to our representatives and say, what else can I do? And the answer we get a lot is like, you can't do anything right now. The industry is dry right now, or
Yeah.
I'll just sit tight. So what can we do in those situations?
So, and that's a conflicting situation because there is some truth to it. It is, the most riots I've ever seen it, since the
Mm.
strikes have ended. It hasn't really come back, that much. It's still there. But I would turn around and say, okay, looks like your strategy. When did you update your last headshots? When did you change your reels? When did you are you taking workshops? Are you networking with casting directors? Are you
Mm.
working on your own projects? Are you creating stuff and putting stuff out there? And this might be the time where, again, maybe not necessarily taking an unpaid project, but maybe doing something with some acting friends and doing a short film together. And, so this way your reel is updated and new. It's something fresh. The important thing is to not have the same strategy because, I mean, the industry, people were still having these conversations way before, COVID was happening. And that is partially true that, sometimes it is also a competitive industry. And depending on your type, and I'm not, this might be a bit controversial and this may get me to not like what I'm about to say, but if you're a white woman in your 20s and 30s, blonde, yeah, there's not going to be, may not be as much for you at the moment.
Oh, that's
Mm.
interesting to hear because everybody's jumping on the like trending culture and
Trending.
Diversity.
a- and and I'm all for that. I'm definitely that's one of the things I've always valued. But I also like, and this could be a whole nother conversation too. I'm all about diversity as long as it makes sense and it's for the represents only because sometimes I used to see a lot of stereotypical roles still happening even today.
100%. And then you see
Yeah.
also in the film that like you could see in the body of work, like, oh, this is a checkbox. They had to check off like this type of diversity, this type of, and I don't just mean race. I'm talking about ability, whatever it is, like
Or gender, sexual orientation.
gender, sexual preference.
And
You could tell.
and that really truly is something that is a bit sacrifice, because it's great to tell a story like How to Get Away with Murder, Orange is the New Black, like series like that got, really value diversity and got away with it and successfully.
Yeah.
But there's also some shows I'm like, okay, how many cards are you trying to, check off in that one episode? I could
Yes.
tell. It's not authentic. And or it's still stereotypical where it's like, okay, I'll sometimes still see breakdown made Hispanic. Wait, what? Why do they have to be Hispanic?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Or you have an
I
Arab in the
remember,
room, Arab
yeah,
terrorist.
Arab terror, yeah, or I remember my old partner. We had a commercial breakdown a while back, and it was like prisoners must be black. Wait, what?
Must be
Hello?
black is crazy.
Yeah. Why do they have to be black? And and this is where I think sometimes the accountability lies because the casting director, she emailed the casting director said, "Why does this have to be black?" And the casting director is like, "Well, this is what the ad agency told us." I'm like, "Well, didn't you think of having a conversation with an ad agent working, stopping together, or again, where you just I'm not going to mention the casting director, or are you just trying to get a little bit extra money and just casting anything at the moment?
Mm,
Yeah.
And that sometimes falls in, but yeah, that's a big trend too. But I would definitely say to have conversation with your rep, but also be very proactive. And this is going to sound counterintuitive coming from a rep, but you should never be dependent on your agent or manager 100% to get you auditions. And that's where sometimes I'll have conversation with people because I have a lot of meetings where people will be like, they'll start venting about, well, I'm with this agent, I'm with this manager, and it's not working, they're not doing their job. And I always turn it around saying, okay, so tell me what you're doing.
Mm.
Sometimes they are, but other times they'll look at me like, huh?
mhm,
What do you mean? And I'm like,
Mhm.
no, you should be proactive, just no matter how many reps you have, whether you have an agent or manager or both. Sometimes actors have both, an agent and manager. The important thing is to be constantly proactive. And then eventually, this is another thing that'll be fully transparent on. There are times when it's maybe time to leave, a
Mhm.
professional working relationship too. If they're not taking these meetings, or they're not listening to you, then it's time to either have an important conversation where this may not be the right fit. And it's hard to do that sometimes as an actor to walk away.
Or as a business partner.
yeah.
Yeah,
And just knowing, like you mentioned earlier, just knowing this isn't a fit. I have to respect myself and my dignity and my integrity and just move on and know that there's
yeah,
better for me. Like I have to create this space.
yeah. And that may be the same thing with an actor, listening to this. Having, if you keep asking your agent, they keep telling you that it's the industry slow. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe, this might not be the right fit for you because they should be then having conversation where here's some suggestions. Because I'm all for changing headshots every 2 years. You know,
Mhm.
minimum, the most is every 2 years. Or even years sometimes if you change appearances because people change.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So you should always get updated headshots. You should always have updated demo reels, even if you have to recut or add stuff or just do something. Because how are you staying relevant? Are you taking workshops with these casting directors? Are you getting in front of them? So those are the conversation that you should be having if you're not experiencing things. There's a lot you can
Mhm.
do. So the important thing is you're in control here.
That was really helpful. I'm so sad that we're at time. I do hope that you join us again. And I do
I
know
would love to.
thank you. Yeah, we because we didn't even get to the hypnosis part, and that was the part I
No,
was most
and
excited to like delve into.
I have like
Sorry, Noel.
10 questions that I want to add that I'm
Well, we can
holding
have a
back
specific
because
episode
the
on that. I'd
conversation is
love
so
to.
interesting. But Albert, at least well, before we really close, there's a question that we always ask our guests at the end, and we want to, I guess summarize everything and get back to it. But from your experience in your field or even your personal life, what is something that you think that you've learned to say it's okay to?
I would say main theme here. It's okay to say no to
I
things.
had a
It's okay.
feeling you were gonna say that.
Yeah, I mean, even as an actor, it's okay to say no. And that even goes to like, let's say that an agent or manager wants to sign you, and there may be if there's a little part of you saying no, that may be the best thing, and it may be okay to go unrepresented for a while if it's not going to be the right fit. Again, it's hard to do that. It's hard to admit that. But the important thing is you have to be comfortable enough to say no.
Yeah. As a
And that
recovering
goes
people
back to
pleaser, that's
Yeah.
yes. Goes back to what we just said. Self-worth, you know your work integrity, you know your work ethic, and then you know what's right and not right for you.
I'll close with, but I wanted to say when you do say no, there's no need to apologize. Like, because I'll see people do this. I'm sorry, but no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This
No,
is not going to work for me. I don't have to really explain. This is not the right fit for me. Thank you for your time. Period.
love that. Love
There's
it.
no, you don't have to explain yourself.
Dr. Albert Bramante. Ladies and gentlemen, you can follow him, albertbramante.com. You have your book, Rise Above the Script, Confronting Self-Doubt and Mastering Self-Sabotage for Performing Artists on Audible. You can buy it in paperback. And I do have the sneak tip because I'm on your mailing list that you will probably have a podcast coming out for actors soon. Can I talk
Yes,
about
it's
it?
called. Yeah, that's called Mental Rehearsals: Tools for Struggling Actors and Actors Who Struggle. So
So
that's coming out soon.
I'm so excited for that. As soon as it comes out, you let me know because I'll be the first listener. I want to be a guest. Please have me
Of
on.
course, there we go. Of course.
Albert, thank you so much for your time. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it, and we can't wait to have you back.
All
Thank you,
right. Well, thank
Albert.
you again, both. Thank you to you both.
Until next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Yes.
Have a good one. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, please consider leaving a comment and a review. It helps us improve and reach more people.
We're all just trying to figure it out one conversation at a time. So go easy on yourself, trust the process, and remember, it's okay, Habibi.